Welcome, everybody. Happy to have you here. Welcome to Coach Steele's Finance Training, and I'm Coach Steele. And looking forward to talking with everyone today about financial literacy. Here at Coach Steele's Finance Training, we talk about all things financial literacy, and we take the complicated things and try to make them simple so everyone can understand. And our foundation, we like to really keep things very basic, foundational, get the fundamentals, the principles, the things that help you with your backbone of your finances. Those are the things we want to hone in and focus on here on Coach Steele's Finance Training. And so as you tune in on today, you already know the rules. Make sure you greet me, say hello, say good morning, good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're in. And I'm excited about another series on today. We're going to get this party started. And we have been talking about the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And when we talk about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's a book that Robert Kiyosaki wrote. And so we have been reading the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And if you're late to the series, that's no problem at all, because each one of the chapters we have gone over, they are recorded on the YouTube channel. So whether you listen on Facebook or whether you listen on YouTube, make sure you go to Coach Steele's Finance Training on YouTube and subscribe, even if you're a Facebook listener, so you can always go back to the YouTube channel and watch these videos as many times as you need to. So that's a good thing. If you end up being late, no problem. We're recording it on the YouTube channel. And we want to make sure everyone subscribe, because we want to turn it up a whole nother level. I'm excited about today as we talk about chapter number 4. Chapter number 4 is pretty interesting, and we've already done 3 chapters. And like I said, good morning to you, Mr. Tony Sherman. Good morning to my wife, Yvette. Good morning to Anitra Perry, my sister. And we have Mr. Tony Sherman just got done with his bicycle ride, 25 miles. Congratulations. Health is wealth. It's very, very important for each and every one of us. And so as we look at this chapter on today, chapter 4, it's pretty interesting when we look at the title of it, because let's see here. We've gone through some other chapters, and let's see if I can go over those. The other chapters that we've gone over so far, you have to remember, and this is the YouTube channel, so just in case if you need it to know where to find it. Chapter 1, it was the rich don't work for money. And chapter 2 was why teach financial literacy, and it talks about assets and liabilities. Let's see here. And then chapter 3 was mind your own business. And then here we have chapter 4. We're talking about chapter 4 when he talks about taxes and corporations. And the title is The History of Taxes and the Power of Corporations on today. So that's what we're going to deal with on today. So if you missed any of those other videos, like I said, you can go to the YouTube channel and catch up on some of those. Order the book. There's a link where you can order the book. If you don't have the link, shoot me a message and or an email. And of course, if you need the email address, it's down there at the bottom scrolling through, Coach Steele Finance at gmail.com. So that's down there as well. All right. So we're going to dive into chapter 4 after chapter 3 was mind your business. So a part of minding your business in lesson 4 is the history of taxes and the power of corporations. And if you've been watching Coach Steele's Finance Training long enough, we actually did a video about the history of taxes on here before, and we talked about it. It was pretty educational, interesting video. But let's get started with what we have right before us right now. All right. And if you have any comments, thoughts, or suggestions, feel free to write them in the comment section. We'll look at it. If you have questions, write them in there, and we'll do our best to answer them as well. We are interested in what you have to say. It starts off pretty interesting in chapter 4, ladies and gentlemen, with this phrase from Robert Kiyosaki. He says, "My rich dad just played the game smart, and he did it through corporations. The biggest secret of the rich." And he really deals with the mindset of poor people and how poor people make money and middle class versus the rich, and talks about the subject of how rich people use taxes and corporations to grow wealth, and how poor people and middle class, that same tax is used to take wealth away from them, and they aren't able to grow wealth as fast. So when we look at the differences between the two, keep that in mind. His rich dad played the game right. And so he starts off the chapter talking about Robin Hood. And you know, Robin Hood used to rob the rich, steal from the rich and give to the poor. And that mindset of robbing from the rich to give to the poor, right? And so in America, we see Robin Hood as this hero. And so I remember watching the cartoon movie Robin Hood, the fox, being sly, being slick, being able to be crafty and creative, and getting on the nerves of the rich and the wealthy and the upper class. And so it brought back a lot of good memories. And so he deals with that in the beginning. But one of the things he says, the reality is that when we talk about the rich being taxed and being taken from them, you know, Robin Hood, he says, is a fantasy. That whole movie and that mindset, when it comes to reality in America, that's just a fantasy. Because the reality is that the rich are not taxed. It's the middle class, especially the educated upper income middle class, who pay for the poor. And so as much as people look at and hope that the rich get taxed, usually Robert's being very transparent here. He's letting you know the rich don't get taxed. It's the upper middle class and the middle class that get taxed, that end up taking care of the poor. But in America, it didn't start off that way. And so he does give a good lesson about it. And the rich dad explains that. Good morning to you, Miss Graham. Happy to have you tuning in to Coach Steele's Finance Training. His rich dad explained to Mike and me. Mike is the rich dad's son. Mike is Robert Kiyosaki's best friend. He explained that originally in England and America, there were no taxes. What would are y'all surprised? Originally, there weren't taxes. And it's funny because in the book, he talks about how America was anti-tax. America did not believe in taxing the people. But if you look at our economy, if you look at our marketplace and the way the world is today, you would have never known that if you don't go do research. At one time, Americans were anti-tax. It had been the tax on tea that led to the famous Tea Party in Boston Harbor, an incident that helped ignite the Revolutionary War. In other words, tax was so taboo that it caused the issue at what we know as the Boston Tea Party. Good morning to you, Mr. Daniel Doxson. Happy to have you tuning in to Coach Steele's Finance Training. On today, we're talking about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the book, and we're going through each chapter line by line and just having a discussion about it. And I'm excited about this because I'm learning so much reading this book over again. I read it in my 20s, but now that I'm older, more mature, I'm catching on to so many more nuggets in this book. So you all join this book club as we go through Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so taxes were so taboo that it could cause a fight. Taxes were so taboo in America, it was like somebody saying something about your mom. It was not the norm. Now in America, taxes is the norm. So when you look at the history of this, what you find out is, and I'll go ahead and read, what these historical dates fail to reveal is that both of these taxes were initially levied only against the rich. So in America, starting out, the mindset was the rich, the wealthy, the royal. Let's tax them to help support the cause. And so originally, it seemed cool for America to be like Robin Hood, take from the rich and give to the poor. It was this point that the rich dad wanted Mike and me to understand. He explained that the idea of taxes was made popular and accepted by the majority by telling the poor and the middle classes that taxes were only created to punish the rich. This is how the masses voted for the law. And so he says it was a strategy, it was a tool, it was a trick to get the poor and the middle class to think that taxing the rich was a bright idea, because long term, the country would have another plan. This is how the masses voted for the law, and it became constitutionally legal. Although it was intended to punish the rich, in reality, it wound up punishing the very people who voted for it, which was the poor and the middle class. And so this is so good because it opens your eyes up to think twice before you vote something and how it may affect you long term. And so, long story short, he talks about now the way the government would spend the tax money. Basically, the rich was able to get the tax money back through using corporations and tax advantages. And then the government wanted to keep funneling that money and making the money from taxes. So they basically started taxing the poor and the middle class as well. And so the poor and the middle class voting in taxes to be legal backfired because they thought it was just for the rich. And then the government came and got the poor and the middle class as well. The rich saw an opportunity because they don't play by the same rules. And so that's what you have to understand on today. When we look at chapter 4, the rich do not play by the same rules. That's why we see multimillionaires. And so when we look at multimillionaires, it's like, wait a minute, why aren't they paying taxes? Why do I pay more taxes than them? Because they don't play by the same rules. They're strategic. And so here in chapter 4, Robert Kiyosaki explains how the rich use corporations and tax knowledge to legally protect and grow their wealth at a faster pace, while the middle class and the poor often pay the most in taxes due to a lack of financial education. And that's why here at Coach Steele's Finance Training, we really hang our hat on financial literacy and being financially educated, because we want you to understand what's going on. And we want you to understand these key lessons that we have here. Taxes were originally for the rich. Taxes were introduced to target the wealthy, but over time, they began to heavily burden the middle class and eventually the poor. Let's go a little bit further. Let's go a little bit further in this book. And as we are live here at Coach Steele's Finance Training, make sure you subscribe. Also, make sure you share the live. We want other people tuning in and getting this valuable information. We need to start sharing more and more information with our community so that we are all informed and educated. Because if the rich and the wealthy are doing it, guess what? We can duplicate it. There's nothing different from someone who's wealthy from you, except for getting the information and then using it. In other words, application. Information, then application. It's just that simple. Get the knowledge and apply so that you operate in wisdom. Let's go a little bit further. All right. The rich saw an opportunity. They don't play by the same rules. The rich knew about corporations, which became popular in the days of sailing ships. So this whole idea of corporations got more attention. Having a corporation to protect your assets from liabilities was from these sailing ships and these voyages. And it's interesting when you do the research on that. I won't spend a lot of time on it today, but if you do your Googles or if you do your chat GPTs, you'll find out that wealthy people made investments in certain voyages, but doing certain and specific investments in certain sailing ships and voyages when they would go out to find things, you only lost what was on that ship that was connected to that corporation instead of it affecting all of your personal stuff. And so that idea of corporations has now transferred over to what we see nowadays. And so it's just that mindset, that principle. The corporation protects you from losing everything in personal. It's only that specific area that might be vulnerable. All right. So it gives you limited liability in a sense and protection. The rich put their money in a corporation to finance the voyage. The corporation would then hire a crew to sail to the new world to look for treasure. If the ship was lost, the crew lost their lives, but the loss to the rich would be limited only to the money they invested for that particular voyage. All right, so let's go a little bit further. And I think this is important to read. As we go over chapter 4, similar to chapter 3, it's very, very short. So we may only do maybe about 30, 35 minutes on today because it was a pretty short chapter. Chapter 1 and chapter 2 were pretty long. But listen to this. It says, it is the knowledge of the legal corporate structure that really gives the rich a vast advantage over the poor and the middle class. So how did the rich outsmart intellectuals? Once the take from the rich tax was passed, cash started flowing into government coffers. This is where it gets interesting. Initially, people were happy. Money was handed out to government workers and the rich. It went to government workers in the form of jobs and pensions. And it went to the rich via their factories receiving government contracts. So the rich paying taxes, but it comes back in the form of government contracts to them. And the middle class were able to get jobs, pensions, and things like that. But a job or a pension can be taken away, can be given, it can be taken away. Now, let's go a little bit further. The government received a large pool of money cut from the taxes, but the problem was the fiscal management, how they managed the money, the mentality of how you manage the taxes and the money that was come into these government jobs. The mentality and the principles of it was just off. And you'll see the difference in a second. The fiscal management of that money. The government ideal is to avoid having excess money. If you fail to spend all the allotted funds, you risk losing it in the next budget. So you would certainly not be recognized for being efficient. And so basically the government mindset was spend it up or we'll get less the following year. Business people, on the other hand, are rewarded for having excess money and are applauded for their efficiency with the money. So it's two different mentalities. One makes sense and the other one doesn't. But as this cycle of growing government spending continued, the demand for money increased. So the whole tax the rich idea began to trickle down to the middle class and to the poor. And so that's how it ended up affecting the middle class and the poor. And so middle class have to be careful what they vote for, hoping that it only affects the rich when it's really going to eventually affect them and the poor as well. All right. And so basically the rich people began to get richer and the poor began to get poorer. And understand this, when we talk about corporations, a corporation is merely a legal document that creates a legal body without a soul. Using it, the wealth of the rich, once again, was protected. It was popular because the income tax rate of a corporation is less than that of the individual income tax rates. So your corporation, your business, how it can be taxed will be taxed less than an actual individual. So it made sense for the rich to put their investments, their money, their flow of their income in the corporation because it's less likely to be taxed as if it were to just come through themselves, their own entity. And so they used the corporation to protect themselves from having to pay as much tax, and they learned the tax laws to reduce having to pay even more taxes. And that's why today we're talking about this subject here in chapter 4 here on Coach Steele's Finance Training, when we're talking about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, chapter 4, the power, taxes, the history of taxes and the power of corporations on today. And as we take a quick pause, as we're going over Coach Steele's Finance Training, I want each and every person to know that if you want more information or you want to be in the same room with people who are talking business and are talking about business and educating themselves to grow, to pray, to plan, to execute at an elite level, then I do want to invite you out to an event that I'll be a part of. And of course, I pray, I plan, and execute It is August 9th, 2025, and we'll be in Richmond Hill, Georgia at the Richmond Hill City Center. And that's 520 Cedar Street, Richmond Hill, Georgia. And definitely go ahead and go to Takara Nicole's website, or you can go to her Facebook page, Takara Nicole. She's right there in the middle. You can go to her Facebook page and go ahead and register for that event for August 9th. I'll be there in the building. Of course, if you look over there to the left, that's me. I'll be talking about entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and some other things. But we have a star-studded lineup, and it is going to be amazing. So definitely make sure you go to Kara's Facebook page and register for that event for August 9th. I want to see your face in the place. We're going to have an awesome time. All right. If you have any questions about that event, or if you need the link, make sure you reach out to me and I'll send you the information so that you can register for that event. I think we're going to have an awesome time. All right. So the government does rely on taxing the working class while the rich find legal ways to minimize taxes. It's just that simple. Why? Because the rich use their knowledge of the tax code to shelter wealth and growth. And that's what you have to do. You have to protect your money. If you do not protect your money, if you do not protect your finances, then who will? Uncle Sam will come get what is available to him. And if you don't pay it on time, then they will come with some interest on that which you owe them. All right, let's go a little bit further. If you have any questions or comments, make sure you tune in. Make sure you write it in the comment section. All right. Average Americans today, I found this interesting. And on my book, it's page 155. It says the average American today works 4 to 5 months for the government just to cover their taxes. Out of the 12 months you work, about 4 months of that is money that's going to Uncle Sam. Oh, that's horrible. When you look at that, that's a fourth. 4 months. That's a fourth of the year is working for the government. And when you work 12 months, it should go to you. Hopefully, it should go all to us. You know, originally when there were no taxes, it went all to you. 4 to 5 months for the government just to cover their taxes. In my opinion, that is simply too long. Think about it. The harder you work, the more you pay the government. And I know some of y'all have seen this. Some of you have gotten raises, you've gotten promotions, you got increase in pay, cost of living adjustments, and it might have been on paper, it might be an extra $500, but by the time it hits your check, you're like, how did I end up with an extra $75 a month? How did I end up with an extra $50 a month? I thought I got a $200 increase. And it's what he's talking about here. The harder you work and the more money you make, the more the government gets paid when you are operating just as an individual and not as a corporation. If you don't have business, if you're not in entrepreneurship, if you don't set up other entities to create tax shelters and assets that can protect your money, no matter how hard you work, the government will win and be compensated if you don't have certain measures in place. The harder you work, the more you pay the government. That is why I believe the idea of take from the rich backfired on the very people who voted on it. And so Robert Kiyosaki keeps driving home that point. He just keeps nailing it on the head that the middle class and the poor have to be more wise on what they vote on and the decisions they make, because it will backfire on them. Every time people try to punish the rich don't simply comply. They react. So the rich don't just sit back and say, okay, well, I guess that's it for us. They don't comply. He says they react. They have money, power, and intent to change things. They don't just sit there voluntarily to pay more taxes. Instead, they search for ways to minimize their tax burden. They hire smart attorneys, accountants, and they persuade politicians to change the laws or create legal loopholes They use their resources to affect change. And so that's the mentality you have to have. Use your resources to create change. For example, one of the tax codes in real estate, is known as the Section 1031. And so with that, basically, you can buy a piece of real estate, and you can do your own research on this. Go do your own research when it comes to getting the full details about this. I'm not a tax professional, but you can buy real estate, and let's say it increases $200,000 in value. You can sell that property, and when you make that $200,000 profit, that's a capital gain. But if you go buy a different property that meets the qualifications required in the 1031 rule, you don't have to pay taxes. You can delay having to pay taxes on that capital gains of $200,000 if that's an investment property. Not talking about your primary home, but you can then roll that money over into another property and not have to pay taxes on it. And you're delaying having to pay taxes on the capital gains. Why would a rich, wealthy person do that? If they bought a house and they were making $400 profit a month on it, but then they can go buy another house and they'll make $1,000 a month on it, then you roll that, sell the house, not have to pay taxes on that money, roll it over. You didn't have to use any of your money in a sense, just what grew in that asset. And now instead of making $400 a month, now you're making $1,000 a month, and you didn't have to pay taxes. So you increase your net worth, you protect your assets, and you grow your cash flow at the end of every month. And it's easier to create wealth faster when you use these tax laws to your advantage. Meanwhile, the regular 9-to-5 person who's not an entrepreneur, doesn't have other things going on, the government's still taking your money. But the rich can grow wealth faster because they took the government's hands out of their pockets. All right. Increase cash flow and pay less on taxes. If you work for money, you give the power to your employer. If money works for you, you keep the power and you control it. And so it's interesting as I read this, I'm like, okay, Robert is being pretty tough on these 9-to-5ers, people who make active income. And he softens up a little bit as we get later on in the chapter, but he does drive home the point. As a teenager, watching his biological dad and his rich dad, he started seeing what his rich dad did to make money, started making way more sense than his biological dad. He says, by the time I was 15 or 16, I knew I wasn't going to continue down the path my educated dad recommended. He started changing his mindset. And that's one thing I want you all to remember today is when you really start listening to the things that I'm telling you and trying to shift your mindset when it comes to growing wealth and financial literacy, it's like a light bulb will come on. And when that light bulb comes on, you are never going to be able to think the same way that you used to before. It's just there's too much knowledge and understanding and success that is attainable to where you just won't be willing to go back to that old mindset. And when that light bulb comes on concerning financial literacy and the way you're doing things, you won't put yourself back in the hole. You won't put yourself back in the rat race because it just won't make sense anymore. All right, I'm going to read another section. He said, it wasn't until my mid-20s that my rich dad's advice began to make more sense to me. I was just out of the Marine Corps and working for Xerox. Now, I like this when he talks about how he had worked in the Marine Corps and Xerox, because the way Robert was preaching in the beginning and talking, he was like, look, it almost makes it seem like he's looking down on 9-to-5ers. But Robert is being transparent and saying, hey, I used to have 9-to-5 jobs. I used to be, making active income. It wasn't always passive income, but he talks about his transition and how he got into businesses, corporations, entrepreneurship, and creating passive income for himself. So I was making a lot of money, but every time I look at my paycheck, I was disappointed. The deductions were so large, and the more I worked, the greater they became. And I mentioned that earlier. As I became more successful, my bosses talked about promotions and raises. It was flattering, but I could hear my rich dad asking in my ear, who are you working for and who are you making rich? Because when we're on that 9-to-5 job, we're making that corporation rich. We're making someone else rich. But if we have something else going on, like chapter 3, mind your business, and we can mind our business and have something else going on, oh, that changes the ball game. So while he was, I won't read that part, but basically he formed his first corporation in 1974 and he began minding his own business. So if you're tuning in to Coach Steele's Finance Training today, I think we're down to about the last 2 pages here of the book. Make sure if you're tuned in, you tell me something, greet me, say hello, good morning, or whatever time you choose to watch this video. Make sure you share this video on Facebook, on YouTube. We are live on Facebook and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right. Next page 160. Robert Kiyosaki says, in less than 3 years, I was, okay, I'm going to get to that part. All right. When he was working these 9-to-5 jobs, he got so disgusted at looking at his paycheck and how much the government was taking. He was motivated to create this corporation, but then he wanted to build it up and grow so that the corporation could make money and not be taxed as much, increase his cash flow, and decrease the amount of taxes he was paying. And he says during this 9-to-5 jobs he was working, but for me, focusing on my own business and developing assets made me a better employee because I now had a purpose. I came in early and worked diligently, amassing as much money as possible so I could invest in real estate. Hawaii had just seen a boom and there were fortunes to be made. The more I realized that we were in the beginning stages of a boom, the more Xerox machines I sold. So basically, he was going to work trying to make as much money as he could. And then he was taking his 9-to-5 income and just investing it in the business. And after 3 years, less than 3 years, he was making more in real estate holding corporation than he was making at Xerox. So he used his 9-to-5 income, his active income, to eventually make so much passive income that his passive income was more than his active income and it could replace it. And of course, we already know if you get to that point, you can technically disconnect or walk away from your job if you needed to. And so in conclusion, what he's saying is without this financial knowledge, which he calls financial intelligence or financial IQ, my road to financial independence would have been much more difficult. And so that's what I want you all to know today, that you really have to increase your financial intelligence and your financial IQ. Here at Coach Steele's Finance Training, we talk about financial literacy. We want to make the complicated things be more simple for you to understand and be able to put it in words that make sense for you. He leaves a good number of definitions in here. If you have the book, he gives you a definition of accounting and what side of the brain you would need to use to get good or use accounting. He talks about investing and what investing is. I like his definition of investing. Investing is the science of making money. I'm sorry, let me read it again. Investing is the science of money making money. Investing is the science of money making currency. And so when you look at that, it involves strategies and formulas that use the creative right brain. All right. He talks about understanding the market, and another word he gives you in here with definitions and examples. He talks about knowing the law, the tax advantages, and the protection from lawsuits as well. And here's 2 things I want you to remember. When you think about business owners, corporations, business owners with corporations, first they earn the money, then they spend the money, and then whatever's left over, they pay taxes. And that's where you want to be. Employees, first they earn the money, then they have to pay taxes. And then they only get to spend what's left over after they pay taxes. But business owners and corporations earn the money, they spend the money, and they get to write off all kinds of things that they were normally going to use anyway. And then whatever is left over, then they pay taxes on that. And so that's just something for you to think about and keep in mind when you think about the flow and the importance of having your own business. Chapter 3, when it talks about minding your own business, because you want to have the right flow. You want to have the right flow going on so that you can take full advantage. And that way you can grow money instead of losing money. And so I'm just leaving some notes here in the comment section. As I'm leaving these notes in the comment section and put them on the screen, if you have any thoughts or questions or comments about the book or what you read or what you heard today, feel free to write it in the comment section on today. And financial IQ is important. And one thing that Robert says, and of course he talks about the whole mindset of, cheering on Robin Hood as a hero. Robert Kiyosaki says, don't hate the player, just learn the game. Don't hate the player, just learn the game, guys. Educate yourself, learn the rules so that you can apply this stuff to your life. Let me leave one more note on here. And that's basically what I just said just now. Learn these rules so that you can apply them. You don't have any reason to complain, any reason to get frustrated about who pays taxes and who doesn't. Because the same laws and rules, you have access to them yourself. So some questions that I want you all to answer when you go back and watch this again, or whether you're tuned in right now. I have about 3 questions that I want you to be able to answer. And one is, do you agree with Rich Dad's assessment of Robin Hood, that he was a crook? Why or why not? Second question, do you think members of the middle class and the poor realize that the burden of taxes has fallen to them? Even though in America, I think it was around 1913, somewhere in there, the poor and the middle class voted to tax the rich, and the government came back and is now taxing the middle class to fund the poor. And the rich have now found creative ways to get out of paying taxes. So do you think members of the middle class and the poor realize that the burden is on them? And another one, here's another question. Are the rich right to use the advantage of corporations to avoid paying taxes? Or do you think it's wrong? Do you think it's something you should learn to do? Do you think more people could follow suit if they understood the system better? Lastly, what are the specific ways that you yourself could benefit from using a corporation for your assets to be able to increase your cash flow and to pay less taxes? So that's your homework assignment. Those are the things you need to answer, guys, here at Coach Steele's Finance Training. Like I said, chapter 4 wasn't that long. Next week, we may do chapter 5. I'll see where I'm at and what I got going on. I may be out of town, but we'll see. But make sure you tune in to Coach Steele's Finance Training. We got a lot going on today. We are doing a water drive. And so we are collecting water. Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church, 1370 Shaw Road. We're doing a water drive today from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. So if you have some water, cases of water, please come by Mount Zion, 1370 Shaw Road. Drop off that water. What are we going to do with it? What we always do with it, help the community out when they are in need. Sometimes, whether there's a shortage or whether there's problems with finding water at the store or whether there's a hurricane, natural disasters, we like to have products and things on deck to be able to serve our community. So make sure you can donate and donate some money to that water drive or donate actual water. So if you can't make it and you just want to send the water, just send the money, then we'll go purchase the water, or you can actually drop off the water as well. Oh, I'm sorry, the water drive's not today? Hold on. Let me make sure. I'm gonna get some clarity real quick. I thought it was today, but I could be completely wrong. Is that next Saturday? Oh boy. Let me see here. Y'all might have to disregard my water drive message. But good morning to Pastor Christy Conyers. Happy to have you tuning in on today as well. Let me see if I can find out when this water drive is, y'all. Okay, I was about to go up to the church for no reason. So, well, this is a heads up for y'all. Everybody tuning in to Coach Steele's Finance Training. That is next Saturday. All right, I just saved myself a trip. I was about to go up there. I was going to be the only one up there for a water drive. So I'm glad y'all said something. But if you want to participate and support that, you have another week to prep, whether it's to get the money ready or whether to get those cases of water that you're going to donate. And lastly, before we get off, thank you for that, Mr. Sherman and Pastor Conyers. Lastly, before we get off, I just want to remind you about the August 9th event that we have, and I have the dates right on this one, guys. The August 9th event with Pastor Takara Nicole. I pray, plan, and execute. I'm excited about this event. Make sure you go to her Facebook page, Takara Nicole, the one right there in the middle in the pink, and her name's in the middle on the flyer. Takara Nicole, make sure you go to her Facebook page and register for that event. And so if you want to get some insight into entrepreneurship, or if you've already in entrepreneurship, but you want to be around other believers and focus on putting your plans together, focus on growing your business and getting some guidance and advice and listening to a panel of experts, feel free, register for that event. We look forward to seeing you there and having that conversation with you, fellowshipping with you, with other believers on growing your business, whether you already have it and you're looking to grow it more, or whether you're just starting from scratch and you just need some guidance and help on how to plan and execute and get that thing off the ground. Anyway, appreciate each and every person tuning in to Coach Steele's Finance Training. Remember the water drive next week, not today. And